Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Beer and Money. On today's episode, I've got a really cool guest by the name of Tyler Graham, who we met on LinkedIn, which is always an interesting way to connect via social media. But Tyler is all about coaching dads with young kids to be more intentional with fatherhood. And that's a very important piece in my life. And I've really loved what you've put out there, Tyler. And so I thought it'd be awesome to have you on to talk to many of our listeners who are our parents, just like us. So Tyler, welcome to the show.
Be here, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me on. Really excited to get to dig deep on fatherhood here over the next little bit together.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, I'd love to start out with, what had you decide, what, I want to help other fathers become better? Like, how did this come about?
Question, and it's a kind of an interesting start. So I'm a dad of 6 kids. I've got 3 boys, 3 girls. My oldest is 10. My youngest is 2. So I'd like to say I'm well seasoned as a dad. A lot of experience, a lot of things that I've learned over the course of my 10 years being a dad. A lot of things that I've messed up and failed on that have taught me valuable lessons that I hope I can teach other dads to help them avoid the mistakes that I've made. But
Yeah.
getting started, I had originally started posting on LinkedIn about 2 years ago. It actually started as a means of professional development. I wanted to improve my communication skills and had read that writing is a great way to do that, and had seen a few other guys that were getting active on LinkedIn, really authentic, personal brands, and decided to test the waters. Was talking primarily about leadership, about non-anxious presence, which is another kind of passion of mine, and found over the course of probably the first 5 or 6 months of posting on there that anytime I would post about my family or I'd post about fatherhood, that it would generate a lot more engagement than anything else I was talking about. People seem to really resonate with the message of fatherhood and the challenges of fatherhood. And had a conversation with another guy I'd met on LinkedIn, and we were just kind of chatting about life. And he made kind of an offhand comment. It was something along the lines of, "You should talk about fatherhood more. You have a lot to share, and I think people really want to hear more of that." And so that was August of 2022. So I kind of made the shift and started talking about fatherhood more, not really knowing where it would go, what it would do, and it just seems to be a message that's struck a chord with a lot of dads. I think that in kind of cultural like norms today, it's not common for dads to get together and talk about the struggles, the hardships, the obstacles that we face in fatherhood, and trying to normalize that, create a space, just a kind of a common message that encourages dads to embrace all that fatherhood has to offer, to slow down and really enjoy it, not try to just grind through it. And thankfully, it's been, like I said, one that's resonated with a lot of people and has continued to give me an opportunity to meet guys like you and to get to just be united and unified in our common pursuit of intentional fatherhood.
Yeah, I found in your post, obviously resonated with me, which is why we engaged to begin with. But a lot of stuff that you were saying was just either things that I was either experiencing at the moment, or things that have come across my mind. And in today's world, which seems more virtual than true, like
Mm-hmm.
in-person reality,
Yeah.
sometimes it can feel, you can almost feel lost as a father, as a parent,
Mm-hmm.
because maybe you don't even know where to go, right? Like, I have a dad and I
Right.
talk to him all the time, right? But things have changed. Like, he says all the time, like, what I have to deal with from a standpoint of, like, I've got a 16-year-old daughter, and working and not deal is wrong terminology, helping them grow, but helping them grow when technology and their face are stuffed in
Mm-hmm.
phones, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
very different conversation. I had a conversation with my daughter just the other day around, like, hey, we have to talk about how to speak to people and not always
Mm-hmm.
text them, because
Yeah.
they can't understand tone in your
Mm-hmm.
text, right? So just that piece. So I got to think
Yeah.
that's got to be a big reason why people reach out to you and are engaging with you on LinkedIn. Are you
Mm-hmm.
finding that to be the case?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think there are a lot of challenges within fatherhood that are unique to our time, our era, right? There are things that that we growing up didn't necessarily have to face, that our parents didn't have to, our own dads, like you said, didn't have to figure out how to navigate, that we're moving into. We're in uncharted territory in many ways. And I think that brings a lot of unique challenges. And then I think that there are things that dads are facing that, again, in the age of social media, it's easy to assume that every other dad has this thing figured out, that they've got fatherhood on lock, and you're the only one who can't seem to get their act together to do it well. And I think that simple message alone has been one that has really impacted many of the dads that I've had an opportunity to engage with. Just the simple fact of knowing that you're not alone in facing these challenges is very encouraging to people. It's very it's kind of a breath of fresh air. It's a relief, a weight off the shoulders to know, okay, I'm not the odd man out here. I'm not the only one navigating this. I'm not the only one having a hard time. I'm actually in pretty good company, because all these other amazing dads are navigating the same thing and trying to figure it out. So that simple truth alone, I think, is very impactful for dads to know that they're in good company.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. If any dads are anywhere near me where maybe ego is a part of it, another part of it is maybe not wanting to share that I'm struggling, which can also be, there's ego in there. There's, what you're worried about people seeing.
Right.
Um, in a world today, like how many of us dads have another person in our life that we can have that type of conversation and not be
Hmm.
fear, not and not worry about what they
Hmm.
think of us.
Right. Yeah, I think I mean, to your point earlier, where so much has moved to be virtual, to be through technology. There's this epidemic of loneliness that you read about. I think that is full for men, I would venture to guess, than it is for women. I think women are much more naturally inclined to form kind of those deep relationships. What author John Eldredge talks about, going beyond the shallows and into the depths. I think men can struggle with that because they don't have these friendships that create space for that. Right? They have the friendships where they can talk about the score of the football game, or they can talk about the challenges of work. But when it comes to the personal life, their fatherhood, the things of their heart that are weighing on them, they don't have a space for that. And I think we're seeing a growing trend now combating that. You see guys on LinkedIn, like the Here Brotherhood, the guys out in Utah, John Moore, Justin Bray, some of those guys that are really kind of going after this and creating communities and space where men and dads can know that it's okay to open up, to share the hardships, to share the challenges, because they're not alone, because there is like grace for that, because there's a support system in place to help you figure out how to carry the weight of being a dad.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we're looking at like steps here, like a big step in this is knowing that, people like you are out there exist. And,
Hmm.
and, and frankly, maybe just as fathers, step one is finding someone that you can have a conversation with, or
Hmm.
so that you can open up that dialogue. When
Yeah,
when fathers are reaching out to you, what are the biggest struggles that they're having right now?
I'd say the number one challenge that I hear from dads is that they don't have enough time, that they are really
Mm.
struggling to figure out how to keep everything in their life balanced, how to work the 40 plus hour a week job to provide for their family, and to come home and be present and engaged with their kids even though they're exhausted, to love their spouse, to take care of the yard, to knock out all the house projects that need to get done, to change the oil in the car. There's just this never ending list of things that need to get done. And I think there's, again, a cultural pressure on men and on dads that almost makes the dads feel like I should be able to do all of this. And then when they can't, they feel very frustrated, right? They feel it's like a shameful thing to admit and acknowledge that they can't do it all, that they can't be everything they need to be. And again, they operate under this assumption that every other dad is doing this. Why can't I? When the reality is, every dad I've ever talked to faces this challenge. Every single dad that I've ever met, that I've ever talked to, has this sense of, I wish I could do more and I don't know how. I already feel at the end of my rope. I already feel like I'm giving it everything I got. How do I tap into another gear to get it all done? And the reality is you can't. And I think being able to acknowledge that, see that other dads are navigating that too, being able to take a step back and acknowledge what's most important, what's most valuable, and being able to focus on those things. I mean, that's really the core of my message in working with dads, is being able to help them assess their life to determine what is most important so they can focus their time and energy there and have more freedom to say no to the things that aren't serving their vision and their values, and not feel that weight, to be able to kind of release that in a guilt-free way, to say, this is not for me in this season. I have other things that need my time and attention. I'm going to give myself wholeheartedly in those places, not try to spread myself too thin.
I love what you said there, right? And because oftentimes, this is a money podcast, so we do talk about money
Yeah.
oftentimes, but it kind of correlates into having time with your family. And the biggest thing that I talk to, or I try to speak to my clients around, is, okay, what is it you value, and
Hmm.
does your spending or does your money align with that value? And you just brought up values from the standpoint of, like, really your time. Like, are you putting your
Hmm.
time where you value?
Yeah.
And I think that's such a huge, I think that's like a big step that is just so overlooked, to your point, because we almost feel like we have to have it figured out, when in reality,
Hmm.
none of us do.
Yep.
We have to get it all done, when in reality, it's impossible to get it all done. So, I mean, would you agree that it starts with, like, you got to figure out what you value, what you and your spouse value, and what you want to
Hmm.
teach your kids, and then in turn engage with them in that manner?
Percent full agreement there. And that really is where I start with most of the dads that I work with, is taking a step back and kind of forming that vision of who they want to be as a dad. And I think it's very similar to the conversation about money, about, right, if you have somebody that you're working with who has a financial goal, or has a picture of, when they want to retire, or a trip that they want to take, right, the steps you'll take them through to achieve that are very similar, I think, to the steps you would take to being an intentional father, being the type of dad that you want to be. If, again, let's use the saving for a big vacation, you're going to budget your money in such a way that you can reserve the money needed to book the vacation. And that's going to be based on the values that you have. You value that vacation. You're going to align your spending and your saving with that value. If we compare that to fatherhood in this example, if we know that you want to be present as a dad, that's an area of focus for you. You are going to figure out ways to align your time to being present with your kids. And then the rhythms, the processes, the systems that you'll put in place to make that happen kind of follow that. They need to be uh, in line with that picture of your future self, that vision that you have. And so you almost think of it as like a budget for your time, where you're allocating time to the things that matter most. Those are going to be unique to you, to your spouse, to your family. You figure out what's important to you, and then you align your actions, your time with that, to make that future picture become a reality.
So I just took some notes here, because I'm trying to really kind of capture what it is we're talking. Like, step one, we're talking about the awareness of it, right? And
Hmm.
knowing that other dads are out there and you're not alone.
Yep.
Step two, I think, as we're talking about this, is figuring out what it is you value,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
And that's a conversation to have with your spouse, not just by yourself, because if
Yep.
you aren't aligned with your spouse, this is going to be a
Yeah.
difficult
Yes.
road to
Yep.
go, right? So what you value. So once you have that conversation, then it's like putting it into action to some degree. I got to
Hmm.
think there's an organizational tool that maybe you speak into
Hmm.
with your dads, to figure out how this comes. How do you put this into action?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll kind of boil it down to what I call my burn-untamed framework, is how I've found it helpful to structure this. And it relates fatherhood to a fire. So you think about a fire needing three things to burn. It needs heat, it needs oxygen, and it needs fuel. And so this idea of burning untamed as a dad, living sustainably, wholeheartedly, enjoying fatherhood, you need those three things as well. The heat is your vision, right? So you think about taking a magnifying glass and focusing the sun's rays, right? If you just toss a log out in the yard, nothing's going to happen to it. But if you take a magnifying glass and focus the sun's rays, it can start a spark, it can start a fire. And so the vision is really that piece of it. It focuses you and it gives you intentionality as to where you want to go, helps you see what's most important, hones you in on those things. The next piece is the oxygen. And I think this is the piece that we can so often miss as dads. And that is like creating space, creating margin in your life to prioritize your vision. So again, if you think about a fire and overpacking the wood, if you just pack a ton of wood into a fire, it's going to burn out. It's going to die out because there's no room for the fire to breathe. It has to have space between the logs for the oxygen to get in there. And again, I think that's where most dads can miss the mark as they're trying to implement new things, as they're trying to bring that vision into reality, as they try to add it on top of all of the things they're already doing. They're already overburdened, they're already overcommitted, and they see this as something more they have to do when they're already, going back to my answer before, they're already asking, how do I have enough time to do it all? You got to create space, and you got to look at the things in your life, like you said, that aren't serving your vision, that aren't serving your values, and eliminate those. In the same way, if you were saving up for the vacation, you're going to cut unnecessary spending so you can reallocate that money to a savings account for your vacation. You got to be able to do that with your time as well. Find the things that aren't serving your vision, your values, cut them out. Not necessarily forever, but at least for a season, to create space to then move to the third piece, which is the fuel. How do you add fuel to the fire, right? Adding logs. And that's where I talk about adding rhythms. And the framework that I use there is something called a rule of life. And it is comes from a Greek word for rule, which is tied to the word for a trellis. So you think about like going to a vineyard and there being these trellises that are propping up the vines, the grapevines, and it keeps them out of the dirt and allows them to grow more fruitfully. It keeps them from being trampled, gives them, more sunlight, and it allows them to grow more. And that's the idea of a rule of life: is that you're structuring your life in a way where you're propping it up, you're giving it the space that it needs to grow. You're focused on the things that are most important, and slowly introducing those things to the point that they become just a natural part of your life. And once that happens, then you can look to add more. And once those become a natural part of your life, you can add more and see and assess if is this working? Is this what this season of my life demands? And make adjustments as you need to. So again, I could talk a lot more about that. But that's kind of the framework that I use.
I love the framework. I absolutely love it. A couple of the notes that I put down on here is I love how the oxygen, right? Creating the
Mm-hmm.
space in between the logs so the oxygen
Yeah.
can get through. So many of us, and I do this all the time, rather than deleting something to then add something, I actually just add. I never
Mm-hmm.
delete.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you that's what so many people
Mm-hmm.
do. And then the rule of life, I love that aspect because, I talk about like having like um, a vision statement around like your money. Like, does this fit your
Yeah.
vision statement? So when you go to spend money on big purchases, like, does this fit your vision? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I always tell the story about how one day I saw a Porsche going by and I really liked the car. So I ended up at the dealership. Next thing I know, I've got like pen in hand about to buy it. And my wife and I have a rule that we have to call each other when we have bigger purchases over a certain dollar threshold. So I call her up and she's like, "Why are you about to buy a Porsche? You don't even care about cars. Like, it means nothing
Mm-hmm.
to you."
Yeah.
Right. So I walked away and I didn't buy it. And that's because of that conversation my wife and I
Right.
had. And the same is true when we come into our children and the values that we have. Like, one of the
Mm-hmm.
values that, luckily my wife and I were on the same page when it came to this because she did this growing up and so did
Mm-hmm.
I, which I think is we're very lucky in that we didn't have to have an argument over
Mm-hmm.
whether or not we wanted to do this, which I think often occurs. But we have family dinners like
Mm-hmm.
every single day, our family comes together and we sit at a table, no technology, nothing there, and we have a family dinner. And what's really I find interesting is my daughter's friends, all of them love the fact that we do this. Matter of fact, when their friends come over, they want to have dinner with us, but they themselves are not doing it with their families. And this isn't me demeaning any of those families. It's just I'm finding it very interesting. That's part of our rhythm, our rule of life that you were just talking about. And all of that came from conversation that my wife and I had. But you have to have that conversation. So I love this framework.
100%.
And I'm not trying to make this all about me. I'm just tying it together with, what I'm doing or maybe what I'm not doing, because a big piece that came out of that family dinner is I did have my phone there for the longest time. And my wife finally said, you got to get that phone out of here. You're not working anymore. You're here with your family. And that was like a big piece.
Yeah.
So love this framework. I can see how it probably resonates with a ton of dads.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I think it's such a great example of, again, why it's so important to have this conversation about your vision and your values. Because for our family, we have what we call our 10 pillars or our values. And one of those is to value the table. And we want to prioritize having as many meals around our table together as possible. And for that reason, to your point, we've had to make other adjustments. We've had to make other decisions that have freed us up to do that. We knew that in this season of our life with a lot of young kids, if we were signing them up for extracurriculars and sports and this and that there was a good chance we would be spending most nights of our week in different places, dividing and conquering, taking them to different practices, games, things like that. And it would minimize the amount of time that we had at the table together. And again, I'm not diminishing that or saying that that's the wrong thing to do. That's how I grew up. Me and my younger brothers were at sports and we loved it and it was great. And maybe that will be for us in a different season of our life. But for right now, we know we need to value the table. That needs to be an important thing for us. And so in this season, that drives our decisions. That drives what we decide to say yes to and what we say no to. And I think the way you laid it out is such a perfect example to be able to say, hey, this is what we're going to value. This is what we're going to prioritize. And that gives you a very concrete, tangible thing that drives your decisions. It makes it a lot easier to say no to things when you know it's going to mess up your family dinner, right? You can easily say that's priority. Anything else is a no. And you can feel the freedom to do that.
Well, and what's really funny about that is the other thing that our family gets made fun of is we eat like we are old grandparents because we eat so early. And even more, like even right now, or actually several months ago, my daughter's on the high school basketball team. And by the way, I was the coach. So like the basketball team, the games, we had to be up there by 5:30, right? So, and that tended to be our dinner time, which was 5:30, which is early for a lot of Americans. Well, because we had to be up at the gym by 5:30, we were having dinner by 4 sometimes, so that the family still had dinner together.
That's awesome.
Like that's how much of a priority it was, because it was, and that's just us, right? Like everyone's going to be different, but the fact of the matter is, no, we held.
Yes.
Like it was so serious that we didn't change. Like if we had a basketball game, which I had to be there for, I was the coach, I was responsible for being there, and obviously my daughter being a player on the team, we just had to change, and we made it work, right? So I had to make sure I was aligned with my schedule at work, because keep that right. 4:00 dinner. Most people are still working. Now I've got the flexibility to be able to do that. But again, it's following that priority. And I just think it's difficult to do until you and your wife are on the same page and you can hold each other accountable.
100%. That's great.
I'm curious, do you have any dads that come to you and you're like, okay, how do I have that conversation with my spouse?
I thankfully have not ran into that too many times where a dad and their spouse are out of alignment on values. Occasionally there'll be maybe some differing opinions or approaches on things, and I think to some degree that's healthy and good, right? I think about the conversations that I've had in my own marriage with my wife about our life and about our parenting. Her and I are wired very differently. And early in our marriage, that created some conflict and some tension. And we've really learned how to leverage kind of those different personalities, those different gifts, strengths, skill sets, to build one another up rather than to feel like we're butting heads. And so I do think that there is, there's some strategy, I think, in being able to have these types of conversations if you are out of alignment. The image that I like to use that I'll go back to when it does come up with dads is, think about like crossing a river and there being like stepping stones kind of going to cross to get to the other side, and trying to figure out how many stepping stones you can agree on, those kind of first initial steps before they start to diverge, before you get to a point where you start to disagree. And I think it's been a helpful framework for me, just to be able to take a step back, really align on the things we do agree on, and see if there's a path forward that kind of meets both of the needs. And then if not, start to wrestle through, is this something critical that we need to resolve? Is it okay for us to be kind of have different values in this one particular aspect of our life? Maybe we feel that we go one path or the other, and the other eventually acquiesces, which has been the case for us in many areas of our life. That's why we have a homestead here with chickens and ducks and goats. That was all my wife. That was her dream, her vision, and it was one of those things that I wasn't necessarily fully on board with to begin with. But it was one of those that, hey, I think this is a really good way to love my wife, and a thing that I think we can say yes to. And now it's part of our life. I love it. We're continuing to grow it, and it's again one of those areas where we started off kind of differing here, and now we're very much aligned on that part of our life.
I love that. So how do your kids think of having all of those animals? Any of them not like it?
Oh, they love it. No, thankfully they love it. We've had a few issues. We had our first round of chickens. We got 12 hens. 3 of them turned out to be roosters, and they were a bit of a terror for a while. So we had to take care of that, if you know what I mean. But other than that, our
Yeah.
kids love it. So we've got chickens, ducks. We've got 2 bunnies. We've got 2 goats to go along with our 2 dogs. And so it's really fun to see all the kids come together, working together as a team to take care of all of them. I love getting to see my 4-year-old daughter, especially. She's just over the moon about the goats. So she'll just go out there and sit with them and sing to them and pet them. And it's like one of my favorite things in the world to just kind of stand by to the side and watch it happen. Because it's again, this is this part of our life that we've dreamed about, that we had a vision for, and to see it playing out in front of us in reality is a really sweet thing. Like, it's a really cool thing to see when a vision becomes a reality, and we're getting to live that out now.
I love that story. I remember you putting that post on LinkedIn, which I'm not an animal person, neither is my wife, but the thought of it sounds intriguing. But seeing what you all did and living that and now hearing that story, that's awesome that you put that together.
Yeah.
What that reminds me of a bit is, again, I think I keep coming back to this because I think this is it's such a huge piece that is overlooked, is you and your spouse, in my opinion, have to be on lockdown. Like, you have to be in lockstep
Mm-hmm.
foundationally with the values, same types of messaging,
Mm-hmm.
disciplinary actions. All of that has to be, and it can be difficult because of the different backgrounds
Mm-hmm.
that many couples have had. And so I'm a believer in making sure that you've got time alone with your spouse to have the capacity to have these conversations, but also I'm also a believer of never stop dating your
Mm-hmm.
spouse.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, how do you go about that? Do you coach into that with other fathers? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, yeah, I 100% agree with you again, and I think it's so important for husband and wife to be on the same page, to be aligned. We talk a lot. It's another one of our family pillars is family as a team, and it's so important to be able to operate together as a team in order to be like successful, in order for life to feel sustainable, to be again wholehearted in your fatherhood, in your marriage, in your family. And so, you think about if you were watching a football game and, the quarterback calls a play and the wide receiver just decides to run a completely different route because that's just what they want to do. like 0% chance of being successful there, right? If the quarterback and the wide receiver aren't on the same page. And so I think it's so important for husband and wife to be on the same page, to be running the same play, to be, reiterating those messages to the kids, that kind of thing. It keeps everybody in sync and aligned. It's a hard thing to do when you have kids, especially when you have young kids, because by the time you get kids down for bed after a long day of work, long day of parenting, it's just easy to just want to chill and to veg out, to kind of turn your brain off with Netflix or scrolling on your phone or something along those lines. And there are nights where that's needed, and nights where my wife and I will do that. It's just kind of a shutdown night after a long day. But the two rhythms that I think have been most critical for us in staying aligned, one of them is what we call our temperature check. So it's a set of questions that we try to ask each other every night. This can vary from being a 10-minute exercise to a 2-hour exercise, depending on how much time you have and kind of how deep you want to go. But it's essentially asking a set of 5 questions. I'll quickly go through them, but it's what are anything you were excited about or appreciative of today? Anything that has you feeling concerned, worried, or puzzled? Any complaints that you have with recommended solutions? Is there any new information that I need to know about? And what are your hopes and dreams for the rest of the week? And again, you can do that in 10 minutes and both kind of quickly answer those questions. For us, we'll do it over a game of backgammon or something like that, just to give our hands something to do and to be able to catch up on the day. We've just found that works better than just saying, how was your day? It's fine, it's busy, kind of going through the monotony of life. So this really,
The mundane response that we all
yeah,
give.
exactly. So these questions are designed really to go more quickly, as we talked about earlier, kind of past the shallows into the depths, and really kind of know the heart of your spouse, the things that are on their mind, the things that are on their heart, the things that may not show up on a day-to-day basis, but are kind of lurking under the surface, that is good to expose and shine a light on. So that's the first one. The second one is regular date nights. I love what you said. Never stop dating your spouse. Again, another hard thing to prioritize at times when you have a busy life and when you're busy taking care of kids. But to be able to have a regular rhythm of date nights is huge. And the recommendation I would have there is date night swaps. Again, this is especially for dads with young kids. I'm counting down the days until my oldest is old enough to just babysit the kids for us. That day is coming soon.
Right.
But in the meantime, we do a date night swap with some friends of ours. So every Thursday night, we trade off. Either my friend comes over to our house after we get our kids down for bed, so my wife and I can go out for a date. And then the following week, I'll go over to their house after they get their kids down so they can go out on a date. It's free babysitting, keeps you accountable because somebody else is reliant on you to take dates. And it gives you, a night to focus on some other stuff. So I use that night for a lot of my BURN-Untamed work, or for catching up on anything from work that day that I missed, because I'm sitting their house by myself. So it's kind of wins all around, and it's been a big win for us. We've been doing that for probably, gosh, I don't know, 7 or 8 years at this point with these same friends, and it's made sure we've kept regular date nights that entire time.
I wrote down those 5 questions because I've never had, like, I love those questions. Matter of fact, I'm going to use them with the conversation that I'll have with my wife and I. We do morning walks.
Oh, love it.
And so it's part of we want to stay healthy. So we ruck every morning. Rucks have got
Yeah,
their weighted backpacks,
love that.
especially. And, so conversations always happen on that walk,
Hmm.
but sometimes they get derailed because one of us is uptight or something like that. So I love the temperature check aspect because we can knock out these 5 questions in the first 10, 15
Oh
minutes of
yeah,
the walk, or you don't because one of the questions was important enough to dive into, right? So
exactly.
it's
Yep.
an organizational too. So I absolutely, so if you don't mind, I'm going to repeat at least what I wrote down and correct me if I wrote it down wrong.
Hmm.
Um, Question 1 is, what are you excited about? Question 2, what are you concerned about? Question 3, complaints with solutions. Question 4 is there any new information we need to talk about? And number 5 is, what are the hopes and dreams for the rest of the
Yeah,
week?
got him.
Awesome. Awesome. You said it's the second time you've used this term in one of our family pillars.
Hmm.
And so did you and your wife actually like write down, like I'm envisioning like the 10 commandments like on your wall, like these are our family pillars. Like do you have this written
Yeah,
down, or is this
yeah,
just
yeah.
kind of a
Funny enough, we actually do have them written on our wall in our kitchen. So we have our kind of family vision statement, and then we have our 10 pillars written on the wall. We've got a little kind of nook in that my wife just took some chalkboard paint and painted this wall and wrote them up there, and they've been up there for years now. So we kind of walk through the doorway of that wall anytime we leave the house, so it's always kind of the last thing we see before we go out. And just, we can see it from our kitchen table, and just serves as kind of this consistent reminder of, again, what it is that we're after, what it is we want to be about as a family. They shape our decisions. When we do kind of our end of year review of how things have gone together as a family, we look at those and we say, hey, are there pillars that we really hit the mark on, that we did really well this year? Are there pillars that need more intentional focus because we've not been giving ourselves to those, or we need to shape some of our rhythms to better align with some of our pillars? So they are written on our wall. They do, we do discuss them often, and they really do shape kind of our day-to-day life as a family.
Absolutely love it. I wish I'll probably still go and do it now, but I wish I would have had like so much of this framework. Like I'm looking back at, my daughter's 16, my son's 14. Had I known half of this or 20% of this, like when they were first born, like I can imagine how many less fights my wife would have had with me. I can imagine like just, it just keeps everyone in sync, and it's a little bit, I don't want to use the word smoother, but to be on the same page and have your spouse together with you and the
Hmm.
family together definitely makes life easier
Oh yeah,
and more
oh yeah,
fulfilling.
for sure.
So, um, I know we've got limited time here. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure we chatted about today before we hopped off here?
No, I love this conversation, and again, I really appreciate you having me on and giving space for us to get to talk through this together. Again, I think kind of my biggest takeaways that I like to leave with dads, I'll maybe end it here, is really just this idea of start where you are, not where you think you should be. It's probably the number one piece of advice that I give to
Mm.
dads. And again, it kind of ties a bow on so many of the different aspects of the conversation that we've had today, is that there's always going to be this temptation to think you should be doing more. There's always going to be this feeling that everybody else has it figured out, or maybe that you're too late, or that you've missed the opportunity, or there's so much that you need to change or shift about your fatherhood. And the reality is, we're after sustainable, intentional, wholehearted fatherhood here. We're not about like quick behavior change, or introducing something that's going to fizzle out in a week or two. That's why I go through the framework that I talked about earlier. So often when I meet with a dad, or when I talk with somebody, they immediately want to jump into, what do I need to do? What do I need to do differently? What do I need to add to my life? And the reality is, it's only going to get you so far. I think really going through that whole framework of creating and crafting that powerful vision, that vision that's going to kind of pull you into the future, and then creating the margin to focus on that, and then start to introduce the rhythms that are going to move you there. Again, you think about, the fire analogy. If you're trying to spark a fire, and you're throwing these, bunch of logs on it to at the get go, it's not going to do anything, right? You got to start with the kindling to really get the fire going before you start adding some of the bigger logs. And so that's really the encouragement that I have for any dad listening to this that feels like that they're not measuring up. You're not alone, and this isn't something you have to undertake all at once, right? Start where you are, not where you think you should be. Introduce some small, sustainable rhythms. Let's use the family dinner as an example, right? If you want to be more present as a dad, pick one night a week. Start with Monday nights,
Mm.
and block that out. Do a phone-free dinner on Mondays. See how it goes. And then once that becomes normal, maybe you want to add another night and then a third night. Maybe you want to add another meal into the mix. You build off that. Action creates traction. So taking that small, simple action is going to give you the opportunity to continue to grow that and to grow into other areas, to be more intentional, to be more present.
Love that. Like we always use in the podcast the term baby steps.
Yeah.
And my business partner, Alex, and I always laugh because the baby steps that we always see is the movie What About Bob with Bill Murray in it. And he's talking about, he's got, he's OCD around germs and whatnot. So like the therapist in it is trying to teach him how to take little baby steps to get over it. So it's like baby steps to the door, like so. And so we make a joke out of it, but it's reality at the same time because we all want to jump to the next level, but you can't get to the next level until you've taken those small baby
Absolutely
steps. So love that. If any of our listeners want to reach out to you, how do you want them to reach out to you? Where do you want them to find you?
LinkedIn is my primary place where I post daily content. Try to be pretty responsive to messages I get there. So look for me, Tyler Graham, on LinkedIn. You can also, I've got a pretty bare bones website, BURN-Untamed.com. Or you can email me at tyler@BURN-Untamed.com. I'd be happy to chat and just kind of talk through whatever challenges you're facing in fatherhood, help you start to form a vision for who you want to be and start learning how to take those baby steps and how to get there.
Awesome. Well, we will put that information in the show notes. Tyler, I so appreciate you being on the podcast. Yeah. This has been awesome.
It's been so much fun, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
All right, Tyler, we'll talk soon.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as tax, legal, or investment advice. Although the information has been gathered from sources believed to be reliable, please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon only when coordinated with individual professional advice. Guest speakers and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by Park Avenue Securities, Guardian, or Quantified Financial Partners, and opinions stated are their own. Guardian, its subsidiaries, agents, and employees do not provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Consult your tax, legal, or accounting professional regarding your individual situation. All investments and investment strategies contain risk and may lose value. This material is intended for general public use. By providing this content, Park Avenue Securities, LLC is not undertaking to provide investment advice or a recommendation for any specific individual or situation, or to otherwise act in a fiduciary capacity. Please contact a financial representative for guidance and information that is specific to your individual situation. Ryan and Alex are registered representatives and financial advisors of Park Avenue Securities, LLC. OSJ 200 Market Street, Suite 1850, Portland, Oregon 97201. Phone number 503-221-1226. Securities products and advisory services offered through Park Avenue Securities, member FINRA, SIPC. Financial representatives of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. Park Avenue Securities is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Quantified Financial Partners is not an affiliate or subsidiary of Park Avenue Securities or Guardian. Ryan Burklow, CA Insurance License Number 0K24924. Alexander Collins, CA Insurance License Number 0H24806.
Pinpoint number 2024-174527. Expiration May 2026.